So whenever we see people mobilising like this from the extreme right, it's essentially a recruitment drive. So they need to be able to be visible, to have publicity in order to get their message out and to try and attract people to their cause. So things like Australia Day, when there's debates going on around the meaning of Australia Day and it becomes like a political wedge issue, this is an opportunity for them to get into and to exploit that in order to present themselves as major players in this space.
And what insights have these gatherings that we saw at the weekend given us about how powerful a force these groups are in Australia?
Well, they like to present themselves as quite a powerful force, but in reality, you're talking about 60-odd people out of 27 million that have come from all over Australia to participate in this event. So by any means, that's not really a huge political force. So in some ways, the way they dress, the way they go about what they're doing is an attempt to sort of suggest that they are more strong and more forceful and more influential than what they are.
We know that many more sympathise with those points of view, but they're not likely to mobilise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. So in the online space, a lot of people will engage in extremist subcultures, including neo-Nazi subcultures or white supremacist subcultures. But getting those people to move from behind their keyboard out into action is actually notoriously difficult. And we've seen this every time the neo-Nazi movements or the white supremacist movements have attempted to mobilise. And they have been on a mobilisation and recruitment drive for nearly 10 years now. And still they fail consistently to get more than 50 or 100 people to any of their events. So whilst there is a broader subculture that sits behind this and that's obviously, quite horrible, mobilising to the streets, it's actually very, very, very few people are willing to go out there and support these movements in any physical form.
And of course, they were wearing masks. Now, the threat of being publicly exposed that we've heard lately there from the New South Wales Premier, is that a deterrent?
Well, I think you have to look at all these ideas from the perspective of what they will achieve. And look, unmasking people will no doubt feel good when we expose a few people, but what are the long-term possibilities of that? So I think they're twofold. There are some people who are very happy to be unmasked and to be given a sort of notorious statement, to be seen as big guys in this space. For people around the fringes of the movement that may just be beginning to get involved, potentially unmasking them might be counterproductive because it starts then to block their options for leaving these movements behind. So I think, there's never a one-size-fits-all solution to this sort of problem, and we need to be looking at the difference between how we respond potentially to leaders, potentially to people who are just sort of beginning to get involved, looking at difference between sort of people who've got very strong ideology and people who might be involved more for social reasons, and sort of have a nuanced response in order to address all these different things that might be going on for people in these movements.
And looking at some of those other tools, I mean, we have the move on orders which were used. There's also the banning of Nazi symbols and salutes. Do we know these to be effective?
So what they do is they provide more options for police responses, but what we also know is that police response is never going to be enough in itself. Police can arrest, then they need to go through the criminal justice system. We've seen some of these main players, if you like, go in and out of the prison system or through the criminal justice system. They're just coming straight back out to it. So I think that there's times when it's really appropriate to use laws, but we shouldn't depend only on those laws. We should be looking at broader societal responses, like teaching everything from teaching civics and the principles of liberal democracy to history, to how we act in our social norms around social media and these sorts of things, through to early intervention and diversion, which is extremely important for young people engaging in these subcultures, trying to give them a pathway out before they become too embedded. And then, of course, when people are breaking the law, we absolutely should respond with a legal response.
Yeah, it's an important message. And at that extreme end, though, how relevant are Australia's terror laws in this setting?
So I think we sometimes jump to the idea of terror laws and want to use the term terrorism because obviously, it's a great way to delegitimise a cause, but it's a fairly high bar to get a terrorism charge up. And so I think we need to understand that there's a broader subculture, if you like, of violent extremists. And within that violent extremist subculture, occasionally some people will engage in terrorism as a strategy or as a tactic. So when somebody is planning an attack of violence or to do harm that would meet the threshold for terrorism, yes, disruption, arrest and prosecution is absolutely the way we should go. If we rely on that as our only response, we're not going to be very effective because, in reality, it doesn't matter what you charge. This has to be upheld in a court of law. And if it doesn't meet the threshold for a terrorism offence, which is quite high, then it's not going to be effective. So we have to look at some of these other options available to us.
Dr. Debra Smith, expert on political extremism with Victoria University. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Gemma.